So now let us study knight takes e5 move in Petroff defense. Well, the type of play is quite similar to the d4 line. Most of the time, white, if he wants something to get something out of the opening, needs to play actively, to know some theory. I mean, strategically, again, the position is not too complicated and very solid for black, so no weaknesses, normal development. So the only chance for white to fight for advantage is to play very aggressive, very forced variations. So actually, well, that is a situation, in the whole Petroff. That's why maybe this is the only opening where I'm going to feed you with a lot of concrete lines. Normally, I try also to explain a lot of strategical ideas in each opening I'm showing you during this course. But here there are not that many. The position is quite simple, and actually there are not that many types of positions which can arise in this opening. They're all more or less the same. Only in this 5 knight c3 variation, which I'm going to show you now during this lesson, the type of position is pretty, original and rather different. Otherwise, it's more or less the same story. So it's pretty much about knowing concrete lines, the exact reactions for black, how to deal with this or that try of the opponent. So knight takes e5, d6. Actually, knight takes e4 was considered to be simply bad. In fact, it's not. It's not too bad, but I don't see much sense playing knight takes e4. First of all, I'm not quite sure that after d4, black has anything better than d6 or d5, which might lead to transpositions. But actually, queen e2, of course, is the main move, and now black has to play queen e7. Okay, he cannot retreat with a knight. Because he's losing the queen. So queen e7, queen takes e4, d6, d4, d5, d5, knight c6. In fact, if white tries to keep his pawn, black has quite some compensation after bishop g4, and maybe even if objectively, maybe white is still better, but it's not so easy for white. So what I would advise you, and that is what makes it, this variation, not very attractive from the black side, is that white can just play knight c3, queen takes e5 is already practically forced, take, and bishop f4. Black has to play bishop d6, then you play bishop g3, and then followed by, at some point, knight b5 or knight e4, and actually, finally, black has to end up in a slightly worse endgame, actually with quite some drawing chances, but still not equal and suffering for the rest of the game, so which makes knight e4 a rare guest in the tournament practice and practically not present at all in the top level chess. So that's why d6, knight f3 is the most logical move. There is knight c4 option, knight takes e4, and for instance knight c3, but that doesn't seem to be very logical, and in general, black has no problem really. I think also queen e2 some was played, queen e7. There are some attempts to knight e3, some strange way of playing for white, but that's, I think, more like a surprise weapon for one game. Normally shouldn't cause any problem to black. And knight c3, for instance, black can just take bc3, and now this makes sense, this variation, because knight can end up on e3, playing d4 at some point, and bishop d3. But here I think g6 is a strong move. I played it once with Magnus Carlsen in rapid chess, and d4, bishop g7, and quite equalized very quickly, and even got a better position at some point. So the main move is knight f3, now knight takes e4, and of course queen e2 is a popular line among players who want to make a draw, or at least to play extremely safe with white. But queen e7, d3, knight f6, and the queens exchanged, and now bishop e7 is one of the possible plans there is another idea to try to play like knight bd7, g6, bishop e7. Anyway, it's clear symmetrical position. White has a couple of tempes, but yeah, of course, no realistic chances to play for any serious advantage. But maybe if for white players, if you feel like your opponent is not so good in endgames, maybe that can be an option, just because then like this you force an endgame, nominally slightly better endgame, and then you can just play it. But objectively, it's not really enough for any advantage. Then there is a very strange move, bishop d3, which was actually first played against me by Peter Leko. A very original idea. Makes sense. I mean, the point is that in case, for instance, of knight c5, then white plays bishop e2, and then, of course, he's going to play d4, and like this, practically winning a tempi. So the safest way of playing, there is d5 possible, and I played also this a lot, because Alexander Morozevich liked to play bishop d3, and I was playing with him constantly in top tournaments, so we had quite some discussions on this position. But I think white has chances here. It's not easy for black, so I would recommend you with black to play simply knight f6, castle bishop e7, and yeah, there is nothing special for white. Still, it's playable. c3, castles, let's say bishop c2, then maybe black can get bishop to g4, or white plays h3 sometimes, then followed by bishop c2, d4. It's quite obvious that it cannot be too dangerous for black, but at least white can get play without too much theory, and it's a playable variation. I mean, again, for some of you who doesn't want to go into some main lines to study a lot of theory, just wants to play a game with white and have still, all the pieces on the board and a slightly better position. Bishop d3 is an interesting option. But in Petroff, you can get this kind of positions quite often. And black, if you're playing this opening with black, you have to be ready mentally and professionally to play it and to play healthy moves and slowly but surely to equalize the position when it gets to such a scenario like in bishop d3 line. Then we get to knight c3. This is a very serious line. Yeah, quite dangerous for black. If you are playing this opening, you need to know, I mean, exactly what you do against knight c3. It's not a very forcing line, although nowadays, since it became very popular for quite many years already, of course, a lot of it's been developed seriously, and there are some direct lines as well. But in general, it's not that forcing as the main lines after d4. So now black's choice is to d5 is not working well because white has queen e2, and now because d3 is threatening, so black has to sacrifice the pawn, but takes on e4, but black doesn't have enough for the pawn. This is just better for white. Then what else? Another option is to play knight f6, but here d4, bishop e7, bishop d3, and yeah, I mean, the knight retreated himself, yeah, and he took on e4, went back to f6, so in this type of symmetrical position, white has a quite pleasant pressure. There is no way black can fully equalize like this, but at least yeah, you are solid with black. But definitely that is a position, that is a dream for white in Petroff, that he is slightly better without any effort, like studying million of lines. So yeah, of course, the most principal move is knight takes c3, d takes c3. Quite strange. I mean, at the first sight, it looks like there is no reason for white to be any better in these positions. But in fact, the strategical idea of white is that is trying to make long castle at some point. And actually, this pawn structure is quite good in a way because it protects the king very well. I mean, it's much more difficult for black to organize real counterplay on the queen side against the king. And if black is castling short, then white starts slowly to push his pawns, to get some initiative on the king side. A very serious line again. So I will try to show you there are lots of possibilities for, especially for black, lots of setups, so I cannot really cover them in detail, but I just will give you my general opinion about the positions which arise in this variation. But again, this variation is very interesting. I mean, for white players, that's a very serious weapon. Seriously consider, I advise to consider it seriously, to make it at least one of your weapons against this opening, against Petroff defense. So bishop e7 normally sooner or later is played, and now there are two options. Of course, if white is just trying to play for short castle, then cannot really get much. So the main idea of the variation for white is to play long castle, and then he needs to develop his bishop. There are two reasonable squares, which is e3 and f4. Both moves has its pluses and minuses. Yes, so I think bishop e3 is more nowadays is more popular than bishop f4, but I'm not quite sure that bishop f4 is any worse. I mean, it's hard to say, because the main difference is that if white plays bishop f4, then the system with long castle, knight c6, bishop e6 is already limits quite seriously white choices. So maybe that is a reason why bishop e3 is more popular. Because here after knight c6, let's say queen d2, bishop e6, so black wants also to make long castle. He's a bit afraid of this kingside attack, and long castle, queen d7, preparing long castle with a bishop on e3. Here I will show you later during this lesson that there are more interesting options for white. Here probably there is nothing better than sooner than later to play knight g5. Maybe it's simpler to play it immediately here. Bishop takes g5, bishop take g5, and then to get to this position, let's say f6, bishop e3, black makes long castle, white is playing b3, king b2, rook h8, developing slowly. Of course, black is extremely solid here, and it's close to equal, I would say, but still, I don't like it so much with black. I remember I had some games in it, for instance, rapid chess with Timur Rajabov, and somehow slowly black has two bishops, and he has some potential. So white usually, what is he doing, is trying to play, I don't know, h3, bishop e2, rook e1, king b2, so settles his pieces, bishop f1, and then starts to try to get some play most of the time on the queen side, pushing his pawns. Again, very solid for black, very safe and solid option, but not, in my opinion, not completely equal still. So if you want to play for kind of 100% equality with black, then you should castle, queen d2. Knight d7 is the most logical way of playing. I mean, the difference is that with a bishop on e3, compared to bishop on f4, black very often doesn't have knight c5 move with a bishop on e3 because of bishop takes c5. Here, this option is possible, and that's what usually black is trying to do. Knight d7, long castle, and now whether rook e8, let's say king b1, always a useful move, knight c5. Whether maybe immediately knight c5, then because black is trying to use sometimes this e4 square. This knight e4 sometimes is quite unpleasant. So white gets his knight to d4, and now as one of the options, there are many, again, in this variation, there are many different setups, options, mostly for black. Black is trying to play very differently here. Sometimes he's trying to play first rook e8, sometimes put the knight on f6. So you really need to first, if you want to study this line for either white or black, you need to collect the games of strong players and try to see how they play this position, and then also to analyze it with machines. But the play here is not so straightforward. So understanding the typical ideas maybe is more important than some concrete opening variations here. So let's say knight c5, white usually tries to put the knight on d4. And let's say if knight e6, bishop e3, or first rook e8, always useful to get the line. So white is playing f3 because otherwise this knight e4 is always very unpleasant threat. And let's say if knight e6, bishop e3. And strangely enough, takes on d4, cd4. It looks like practically completely equal position. Maybe it's not much for white, but black still has to solve some problems here because white just slowly playing usually bishop d3 and starts to develop his play on the king side. G4, h4. It's far from mate, but I would say that still maybe white has at least an easier game, if not a slight advantage, but at least an easier game. So bishop f4 line is perfectly playable, but bishop e3 is now more fashionable. So the thing is that if now black wants to play this setup with long castle after knight c6, bishop e6, long castle, queen d7, now white has many more options with the bishop on e3, mainly because, let's say, after king b1, it's not so easy to make long castle for black, because bishop on e3 is much better placed. For instance, a very typical idea is at some point to play knight d4, and then if you change, then queen d4, and then there is a7 pawn, g7 pawn is under attack. Well, on top of after long castle, also bishop b5 is always has to be considered. Yeah. So usually black is trying to play a6, just a useful move. And now white always has knight g5. That's a point that, of course, if knight g5, black must give up this bishop, not the white square bishop, because then white would be better. And then, playing this type of position which arises after bishop f4. But white has many other interesting options here, like h3, for instance. There are lots of games where white is trying to find some subtle move orders, some subtle moves to get some pressure. For instance, again, if long castle, knight d4 might be a problem. For instance, takes, and then queen can, get to a7, which might be quite dangerous. Or let's say if black is also making a useful move like h6, one of the possible ideas for white here is to play g4 followed by bishop g2, and then all in all, it's very solid position for black. Not much for white, but he can press. I mean, I wouldn't say, I had a feeling it's not totally equal when I studied this variation with black. Of course, I played mainly short castle, but I also studied long castle, this setup. And I was not entirely satisfied with this position with black, even though, again, it's more solid than short castle. So short castle, queen d2, and again, now there is a huge choice of possible plans for black. Well, white is more or less doing the same, it's just about the move order, so he makes long castle. Very often king b1 is a useful move, and then he tries to get h4 and bishop d3, sometimes knight g5, and starts his play. So black, again, here you must study especially recent games or many games of very top players like Carlsen, Caruana, Ranyan, and so on. So study this game. Choose what kind of setup you prefer with black. But normally, I mean, most often black puts the knight on d7. Here it's more flexible than on c6. And after long castle, now, yes, black tried almost all possible plans in this position already. For instance, knight e5 is possible, but the thing is that, let's say, even white often just plays king b1, and you are not really threatening to take on f3 here, because gf, of course, the pawn structure is very compromised, but as strange as it might seem, but this play on the G line is quite uncomfortable for black. I've analyzed a lot this type of positions because I always was tempted to spoil white's pawn structure, and then maybe one day in endgame to try to win a better endgame, but it's very difficult to get into an endgame, and white's initiative is quite long term and very annoying. So I was not that happy with a knight e5. But now black has different options. Also, c6 is a logical way of playing, trying to get d5 at some point. knight f6, queen a5 sometimes. Let's say the game can develop h4, for instance, and in case of d5, then maybe white can try to play c4, open up the position. I think that nowadays the latest trend is to play knight f6 here immediately. And then this plan, for instance, bishop d3 is now already a logical move since black doesn't have knight e5 or knight c5. And very interesting is c5. It's a new fashion, so black is trying to organize his counterplay very quickly with queen a5, bishop e6, b5. But that is, that you have to analyze. This is what Duda, who likes playing Petroff nowadays, so he played many games with this plan against Caruana, against Karyakin. So but it's pretty direct. This plan is quite direct, so I guess you will need engines here to analyze this position. But it's quite interesting for black because he really starts to get his counterplay. For instance, one of the latest games in Nxe5, I think 2021, Caruana Duda, and Caruana, who is a very big specialist of this variation, especially from the black side. So he came up with this new idea, like rook g1, b5. So you see black is trying to get his counterplay, and g4, and the game was extremely sharp, very complicated and unclear. But that's an interesting plan. Rook e8 is another way of playing. It's just that you are making a useful move, and then you wait how exactly you will set up your pieces, depending on what white is going to do also. That's also same story with white. That's why very often white just goes king b1, also waiting for black, where he wants to put his pieces. And now, for instance, knight f6, bishop d3, it's one of the many possible variations, because of course white can also start with h4 and so on and so on. So each move has its own nuance. But let's say here bishop d3, and now another interesting plan, which is also it's becoming popular in this particular position and in this type of position in general, is something like this: bishop d7, and then black is trying, after let's say rook h1, black tries to play c5, and followed by bishop c6. So in case of c4, a6, and b5, with quite decent results. In general, practical results here. So all in all, what I can say about this variation, it's simple to play with white. The play is very straightforward and quite clear what white has to do. Black has a quite big choice. If you don't know exactly what you are doing with black, you can end up in a really worse position. So you have to to be well prepared against this line. But all in all, seeing the latest games, I feel like there are more and more ideas for black, now coming up, which actually are very interesting and equalizing ideas than for white. So I believe that this is not going to lead to an advantage, this line with white. So it shouldn't be too dangerous for black, but you'll need to spend really quite some time here to study this variation. So then we come to the main line, the main move, d4, the most logical move. I can just note that it's possible to play d3, knight f6, d4, but then after d5 we suddenly end up in an exchange variation of French defense, not extremely dangerous for black. That's why d4. The point is that d5, actually white tries to pretend that the knight on e4 is standing worse than on f6, because after bishop d3, very often white has a c4 idea, knight c3, so this knight is a bit shaky on e4 because of this extra tempi white has. Otherwise, it can also be a strong piece, a good asset of the position. Let's say theoretically, if black manages bishop d6, c6, f5, the knight might be quite strong. But I mean, if white knows what he's doing, in general, it's better for white to have this position than what he can have also the position with a knight on f6. And now black has a conceptual choice where to put his black's color bishop. So bishop d6 is one line which we are going to start with. Another idea is to have bishop on e7 and then very often knight on c6. It's possible to start with knight c6, and that's quite often the case if black wants to play bishop e7 line. But after castle, yeah, there is definitely nothing better than bishop e7 because bishop d6 is simply not good. c4 is coming and black has a trouble in the center. Or bishop g4 also is not working well because of c4. And according to theory, white is better here as well. So knight c6 castles bishop e7 anyways. That's why I will consider it via the bishop e7, 6 bishop e7 move order. But let's start with the bishop d6 line. It's a very, very direct one. Now, I think that in current state of theory, it's not easy for white to get an advantage. But again, here the preparation, or if you want, the power of your engine can be decisive in the outcome of the game in this variation, at least on the top level. Castles, c4 usually is played c6. So again, here white's only advantage, because the position is symmetrical, is basically extra tempi. Not that much of an advantage, but still something. And it's logical that white has to be very quick, trying to find some ways to attack the knight on e4 to develop his initiative quickly. Of course, any kind of quiet move like h3 would immediately lead to a totally equal position with zero chance for any advantage for white. So what are the main options here? Actually, queen c2 was considered to be a very dangerous line back in the 90s or in 2000. I remember I was quite worried because I also analyzed bishop d6, although mainly playing the lines with the bishop on e7 with black. But queen c2 was quite a difficult move to face. But I see that now with new engines, computer games, and it seems that black has few ways to get interesting, quite decent position, even though it's most of the time it's very complicated, the positions after queen c2, very double-edged. So there are different new ways. Rook e8, knight c3, supposed to be bishop f5, rook e1, so pressing the e4 knight a6, a3. I think that is not totally satisfactory for black according to theory. So the main move was always knight a6 in this position, but now computers come up with some new ideas, like after bishop g4. The idea is that if white takes the pawn on e4, then black can get it back very quickly just by taking and playing queen h4 and taking back on d4 as one of the options. But in general, on top of this, actually, quite often black simply has compensation, just a long-term compensation if white gives up his bishop, taking the knight on e4, for this pawn. So normally in bishop g4, the problem was knight e5 move, but now bishop e6 seems to be actually having a very decent practical result. So maybe this is a line which is interesting. But to my big surprise, the new fashionable move is even h6. Of course, I've never even had a thought of analyzing such a move. Very strange move, but in fact, computer statistics is pretty fine here for black. The idea is that if white takes on e4, then black just plays for compensation. h6 is a very useful move here. But I guess white has some tries like knight c3, rook e1. I have to investigate it. This position, but at least just want to draw your attention that it might be also a decent move. But the main move is knight a6, a3. Again, now there are many different ideas for black. One very, very interesting fourth in line is bishop g4. I played it by actually myself more than once, even I think in classical chess. At that time, computers were not certain if it's enough or not for equality, because here the play gets very direct. Knight e5, takes on e5, knight ac5, and f3. Otherwise, black is doing very fine. And then knight takes d3, queen takes d3, knight c5, queen d4, knight b3. Otherwise, black loses piece. Queen g4, knight a1, bishop h6, g6. It looks pretty terrible for black, but for quite a long time, computers couldn't find any advantage here for white. But I think I have to check. But I think finally I played it once against Yakovenko, if I remember well, and even almost won the game with black. But I think finally I found some way for white to be better here. So very, very, very dangerous line, okay, to play. But I think now f5 is doing pretty okay. In my time, so to say, when I analyzed very deeply this this system with bishop d6, knight c3, knight c7, okay, it was considered to be slightly better for white, and but now I see that it changed quite a lot, and in general black has good statistics here. So I guess queen c2 is not so fashionable anymore because it seems that black has more than one way to get an interesting game, and even sometimes double-edged, very unclear position. So now then another old main line is very simple. If white plays very simple, cd, knight c3, taken on c3, b takes c3. So here the idea is that black has a certain potential weakness on d5, and white wants to use a little bit better development just to get maybe a slightly better position, to put some positional pressure on black. Maybe black can just try to play knight d7. There are lots of quiet moves here. I'm not sure it fully equalizes, but what you have to study if you want to equalize, with black very clearly, then bishop g4 is a very serious option. But now, on top of some possibilities for white to play it slow, usually after bishop g4 it will not really bring anything because black wants to develop. Then the spin is quite unpleasant. But there are some forcing lines like rook b1, knight d7. If b6, then suddenly rook b5 might be a very unpleasant move here. Because black can already take on d5 in case of a6, and rook d5 is possible, because if bishop takes h2 check, knight takes h2, and white wins material. That is, by the way, why rook b1 is a bit more precise than playing h3 immediately, because here in this variation, maybe after b6, rook b5, white is not threatening probably to take on d5. Let's say if black plays a move, maybe it can just develop, but even if a6, I'm not sure that this is working, because check, knight takes h2, and queen takes d5, and the bishop is protected on h5. That's why rook b1 is more accurate. And now, so knight d7 is supposed to be the main line, and here h3, bishop h5. Now white has different ideas. One is to play rook b5, some very, very complicated position like this. c4, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, dc4, and simply bishop c2. So white is playing for compensation, has quite some play. Here, this is one of the possible lines. Another one is rook takes b7, knight b6. And again, here, you just need to study this position with powerful engines and to make your verdict. I think according to the recent state of theory, it's enough for black to equalize, but the position is extremely sharp and complicated, so a better prepared player will probably prevail in this situation. And you never know if even more powerful computers will finally find some way for white to be better in this position. So this is a serious option, c takes d5. And then rook e1. Rook e1 was at some point became a main line for quite a long time, but now it seems that it's quite difficult after bishop f5. White cannot really find ways to get an opening advantage. By the way, rook e8 is not very popular move, but also not easy to get better for white, because knight c3, old main line, knight c3, bc3, rook e1, queen e1. It is supposed to be very nice for white, comfortable. h6, for instance, is a main move here, and white has a number of options here. It looks quite pleasant because this e line, black is undeveloped yet, but when you start to look at this this position with the machine, yeah, I mean, visually I was very happy playing it with white, for instance, because I also played d4 and prepared this variation with white color. But then when you start to play against computer, it's very difficult to prove any real advantage. Of course, white has some options like a4, sometimes getting a5, by the way, sometimes rook a2, rook e2 ideas. Also knight e5, very straightforward, trying to get f4, but yeah, none of it I find very clear that it leads to a clear plus for white. But I just can draw your attention. There is recently, I think, queen b3 move became popular. I don't know why. Again, here I can explain you for hours some strategical ideas, but basically it's very tactical position. Yeah, it's so instead of that, you better spend time just checking it with engines. But I think queen b3 is an interesting move. In any case, after rook e1, the most difficult is for white is to find something against bishop f5, because, well, here, if queen c2, knight a6, a3, there is a big difference. Black is in time to get bishop g6, and you know, because we had this position with a rook on a8, and then knight c3 was causing problems. But here bishop g6, bishop is, because the idea is that if you take on c3, white can take on f5. Here bishop g6, it seems to be fine for black. Then another line is cd5. I mean, queen b3 is a main move. cd5, knight c3, but that's not dangerous because black takes, and I think after knight d7, he's perfectly in time to defend all the weaknesses like d5 pawn, and all black needs is just to finish his development. He will be fine, and he is here in this position. So queen b3, I think, is the most dangerous move here. And I remember actually preparing it for my match against Peter Lecker, who used to play this bishop d6 Petroff with black, so I spent a lot of time trying to find something with white, and I remember that was my main weapon, because I found this totally new at that time idea, which I will show you now. I thought queen b3 is a very interesting try, because queen d7, I think, is a main move. In case of knight a6, knight c3, this position is again not too much as always in Petroff, but not easy to play with black. Also, at that time, I remember knight a6 was considered to be enough to equalize, and I found this idea with white of this position after knight c3, and actually I see now that is why black tries to avoid playing knight a6 and going for queen d7, because, well, by the way, there is tactics. Black can play knight c5 and take the queen by force for 3 pieces. I don't know what about modern engines are saying. You know, in general, I think modern engines have a tendency of overestimating a bit the queen against pieces, but I think white is better here. I think it's in white's favor, so 3 pieces are stronger than the queen in this position, and probably it's many other players agree with me, because knight c5 is not played too often. Usually black takes on c4, bishop takes c4, knight c3, bc3, and let's say b5, bishop f1, knight c7, and let's say a4. And this position is slightly, but kind of annoyingly better for white. So black doesn't have any way to kind of clarify the position, has to, well, to defend slightly inferior position, maybe with good chances of success, but no clear equality, in my opinion. That's why queen b3, queen d7 is a move. And now it's considered to be totally fine for black, but I found this tactical idea, which is now basically the main line, is knight c3, takes on f5, queen takes f5. And bc was the old theory, b6, cd. It's also, black has to be accurate here because he needs to finish his development, but I think that black is fine here. In general, he's always in time. But I found this queen takes b7 idea, and it's very tricky. I made a lot of analysis on this variation, was ready to play it with white, and now it's supposed to be kind of main line in rook e1. But so queen d7, knight d7, and c5, a very important resource, because if bc, dc is just nothing for white. So this intermediate move c5, and actually bishop takes h2 probably is the only way for black to fight for equality, because this position after bishop c5, I think dc5 is, strangely enough, is very, very dangerous for black. So bishop h2, knight takes h2, knight e4. And I think we analyzed it back in 2004. Was it preparing for my match against Leka? We analyzed this endgame, and actually the verdict is more or less what is the theoretical verdict now, which is black has to be accurate. I mean, there is a danger in black's position, but if he knows, if he knows exactly how to play here, black should be able to equalize. So that is a state of theory in rook e1, quite dangerous move also. And now the latest fashion is to play knight c3 here. Again, back then in 2004, it was considered to be harmless, but now computers, they found some ways to pose problems for black. So this is the latest development of this variation. The idea is that I guess if black is playing bishop g4, white has this additional option c5, which can be quite dangerous. This type of position, rook e1. So I guess that is the reason why already here black is taken immediately on c4. Bishop takes c4, and bishop f5 is probably the best move, because if you develop bishop to g4, then after h3, bishop h5, white can probably just play g4 and knight e5 is quite dangerous, I believe, or even rook e1, knight d7, let's say g4, bishop g6, bishop g5, queen c7, knight h4, trying to take this bishop, and there is some initiative. Of course, this bishop is quite important. If white manages to, instead of exchanging it to his own white color bishop, to exchange it for his knight, that makes a big difference. And again, the game is very concrete. So I mean, you need to study it move per move, because black might just be in time, to equalize. But all in all, if white manages two bishops here, he will be better. So bishop g4 is not very common move in nowadays practice. So bishop f5. And now some computerish, normally black just wants to develop knight d7, queen c7. He will not have any problem if he manages. But now computers find some tactical, tricky ideas. So this you really need to, again, as many positions in Petroff, this is such an opening that you need to work to use your engines quite a lot to be sure that you equalize with black or pose problems with white. And queen c7, for instance, all of a sudden runs to quite serious difficulties. Rook e1, and after h6, so black wants, just in case of bishop retreats, to develop and so on. And now all of a sudden knight h4 is just a killer, very, very strong move. Bishop h7, bishop takes h6. I think there was a game of Nepomniachtchi, he beat someone like this, so he just happened to have a more powerful engine than his opponent, and it seems to be very strong. That's why most of players are playing queen a5 now. And there are different options for white, rook e1, knight h4, but actually the latest trend is to play d5, and I guess there was a game, for instance, quite an important game, Nepomniachtchi-Yesipenko, where Nepomniachtchi got better. Then Yesipenko, I think, improved his play playing against Karyakin in this variation. So here it's very tactical. This position probably like most of the situations when in Petroff or in general when black plays a solid, healthy opening, that black, if he analyze it well with a very precise play, he probably manages to make a draw in this variation. But you see, so bishop d6 is not a very nice variation to play because lots of dangerous options. But from other point of view, it's very direct. So if you have a very good preparation, you learn all those lines by heart. You have a powerful engine and a good memory. It's very possible that in bishop d6 line you will somehow manage to hold it, and there is no strategical danger here, only tactical. With white, it's perfectly playable. I mean, you can always try to find some little ideas. You see there's rook e1 line, cd5 line, and followed by knight c3. Knight c3 immediately. Everywhere there are some prospects for white. So bishop d6 here is a very forcing line with a lot of direct variations. Maybe more risk, actually more tactical risk than the lines where black puts bishop on e7. And that's why, maybe that's one of the reasons why when I played Petroff myself, I usually played the system with bishop e7. At that time, usually black would play knight c6, bishop e7, and now there is a new system which seems to be very fashionable and quite difficult at this moment of time for white to get anything, which is bishop e7, castles bishop f5. But let's start then with the old main line. So bishop e7 or knight c6 first, castles bishop and knight c6. This position. I've played millions of games here, analyzed it a lot, and all in all, again, a lot of knowledge is required here for black. But I think it's holding. But again, the same story, as always in Petroff. So objectively enough to equalize, but a lot of theory and quite a number of different tries for white here to get something. It will never be too much, but it's quite a big difference if you equalize, very clearly, or you get a slightly worse position, which you have to defend, for the rest of the game. That was not usually the scenario I was aiming for playing black, Petroff defense, but sometimes I would get into this scenario from time to time, even with good preparation. So c4 now is the main move. If rook e1, I was trying to play bishop g4. This is a very principal old main line with lots of theory here. Actually bishop f5 is also possible. That would more or less, I guess, lead to a similar positions on bishop e7, bishop f5 variation without the knight on c6. So then it's already more logical maybe to start with bishop f5 instead of knight c6. So that's why rook e1, bishop g4. And now there's huge theory. I mean, main line goes like this, c3, then black is playing f5, and actually here, it's very, very double-edged variation with lots of theory and very unclear positions from time to time. So this is one of the very few lines in Petroff where you can try to play for a win with black. Queen b3 is one of the main moves. Again, it's getting very tactical. Castles, knight bd2. And now there are different ways of playing. You can try to sacrifice the pawn on b7, but it's not so clear if it's enough for black to get a good game. So I was usually playing knight a5, and then if queen a4, knight c6 or queen c2, still knight c6. Okay, presuming that white probably doesn't want to repeat moves and make a draw. And now, again, a lot of theory, you need to study it. For instance, one of the main lines is b4, a6, a4. And because white wants to kick out this knight from c6, theoretically, and to get his knight on e5, then he can be better. But black has quite some ideas in this position. So huge theory. I think I played many games here. I think black is doing fine here, but it's a very sharp game. So if then there is another move, knight c3, possible, quite a serious option also. And I was actually the main line, so to say, is bishop f5, and that after rook e1, which is the best move, that leads to a position which we will also see, the type of position which we'll see in the bishop e7, bishop f5 variation. Only that here the knight is on c6 already, and the knight takes c3, bc3, takes on d3, queen takes d3, castles. I was always afraid of this position. Computers are holding it very well nowadays, and humans also after analyzing these computers. But all in all, it's again, this position is quite dangerous in a practical sense. White has lots of options: bishop f4, sometimes playing rook e2, trying to double rooks at some point. Of course, black just needs to finish his development. If he manages queen d7, rook e8, bishop d8, everything will be fine. f6 maybe, but white can try to pose some problems in a very concrete fashion. So black has to know very well, how to treat this position. I think according to the nowadays theory, black is equalizing here. But still, I preferred to take on c3 and bishop g4. This is another line, let's say rook b1, rook b8, and also a lot of theory. I think that, since it was one of the main problems of knight c6, bishop e7 for quite some time, I analyzed this really a lot, and finally, for instance, you can see my game against Alexander Grishuk from Candidates in Kazan 2011. I think I equalized, I equalized there, and I still believe it's enough for equality. I think it's a bit safer in a way than the bishop f5 variation after knight c3. But still, there are some dangers. You need to know move per move. You need to analyze it, to check games. But I think all in all, knight c3 is very safe for white, very pleasant in a practical sense, easy to play, but I think if black is ready, he will probably equalize here. So the main move then is c4, and now black has, I always played knight b4 here, maybe a couple of times I was playing knight f6 also, but main move is knight b4. Well, the idea is bishop g4 is not accurate here, is already not working so well, because white can even simply take on d5, queen d5, knight c3. Takes, and this position is slightly better, I believe, for white, because when black takes on f3, you can change queens, and actually this endgame, of course, if white wouldn't have this double f pawns, he would be just better, but even with those pawns, it's still not so easy for black to equalize fully, even though maybe with accurate play he should manage. And another idea is knight c3, actually. This is also quite unpleasant for black, and because then probably the best move is knight f6, and now you can take and play h3, and probably black should play bishop e6, which would, let's say after rook e1, lead to a theoretical position with white having an extra tempo h3. So bishop g4 is considered to be not a very precise move. Then it's actually possible to castle, but again, I think it gives white some additional options. First of all, rook e1 would transpose probably to some other lines, but knight c3. I think I was not sure, about knight c3 when playing black. I didn't like this position, even though nowadays so takes, and black is trying to play bishop f5, bishop d6. Close to equality, but at that time I thought, it's not fully equal, and white has some potential here. And another way of playing is cd5, queen d5, and now knight c3 simply, for example, takes, and bishop f5, bishop f4. Again, it's very tricky. There is a small nuance that white hadn't yet played rook e1, and which makes some difference compared to the line bishop e7, bishop f5, which I will show you later. I think here, usually if rook e1, rook e8 is installed, then it's a bit easier for black here. There are more problems. So all in all, castle is not so easy for black. Again, I just before continuing, I would like to mentioned that there are so many different move orders. Yeah, you really need to, if you're playing it on the very serious level, you need to understand all those nuances. It's not so easy, yeah? If you already want to play this Nxe6 variation at all, then there are lots of transpositions from one line to another line, and sometimes with a very small difference, which actually makes a big difference. So you have to get all those move orders in your head, in full order. So knight b4, what else? Knight f6 is actually a solid system, perfectly playable. Yeah, very solid. So I can recommend you, again, at that time computers were much weaker, and I was not able to fully equalize here with black, so I played it only once or twice, maybe in rapid chess, but was not that happy about it. Now I see that computers are much more successful in solving this task, equalizing, so maybe knight f6 is a very, very decent option also. So how it continues, usually the game is like this: knight c3, castles, and now white has two different options. So this or that way, he will end up with isolated pawn. Let's say one way is just to take on d5 immediately, knight takes d5, and then rook e1, and bishop e6, a3, followed by queen c2, bishop c2. White has certain initiative. White has some initiative here, so it's not completely trivial, for black to equalize, but I think that probably it is manageable, even though, it's perfectly playable with white also. And another way is to play h3, actually just to stop bishop g4, and black probably will, at least that's the way it was played 20 years ago when I studied this position. Usually black would play knight b4, bishop e2, then take on c4, and play this very typical position, rook e1, knight b d5, for instance, bishop g5, bishop e6, queen b3. I think that was a tabia at that time. I remember that Leko won a very, very nice game against Michael Adams in Candidates Tournament 2002. Michael just played queen b6 and saw that this endgame was very close to equal, something like that, cd5, but Leko with a fantastic play. By the way, you can check this game, just a positional masterpiece. He managed to slowly to outplay Michael Adams and to win the game, so probably that is not fully enough to equalize. So maybe the best move finally is rook b8, and black is a bit passive. White has very active position, but from other point of view, black is very solid, no weaknesses, all pieces developed, so shouldn't be too bad this position for black. Maybe, anyway, at best white is very slightly better, maybe nothing special. So knight f6 is also possible variation. I prefer to play more principal line with knight b4, but that also requires quite some knowledge. So bishop e2 now is a main move. Actually, cd5 is a very direct line. I think black equalizes here, but you need to know this. Takes on d5, rook e1, bishop f5. Of course, black's position is very tricky. Very dangerous. Everything is hanging, king is in the center, but there's been a lot of games here, and it seems that everything is under control if you know some concrete lines. For instance, knight c3 was an old main line, but that is not too dangerous because you play bishop e6, just giving up this c7 pawn, then bishop d6 and castle. Black has enough compensation here for the pawn, so the game should end in a draw normally in this position. But then white also has this g4 idea, bishop g6, knight c3, takes. So the idea is that, of course, g4 is weakening, but now black doesn't have bishop e6 move. And I remember at the very beginning when this g4 move was discovered and the engines were quite weak, I lost very quickly in rapid chess against Vishay Anand because I followed computer advice and then just got crushed. But finally, analyzing it more deeply, I think at least according to my personal analysis, and I think it's still approved by modern computers, that actually f6 move, very dangerous looking move, but it seems that black it's enough to equalize f6. It's very important to cover the e5 square, And the point that after queen c7, black can just castle. Rook e7, queen f3, rook g7, king h8, and black has enough play for a draw here. So after f6, white was trying knight h4, and then king f7 or king f8, something like this, queen c7, rook e8. Okay, you should definitely check it with modern engines. Maybe they will say something, which was not considered by me at that time, but I think that is a way to equalize for black. And then bishop e2 is the main line, castles, knight c3. And here there is a big theory in this position. I mean, old main line was bishop e6, but I played it also myself. But then I was not totally happy about this move. So I moved to bishop f5. At some point I even discovered this novelty b6, which I've played against Garry Kasparov in Linares 2000, and it's not such a bad move, very strange move, but not so bad. Anyways, I think white also found some ways to put some pressure here as well. So finally I moved back to bishop f5 to this line and played so many games here. Many players, Anand more than once, and Shirov, and many e4 players, they tried to, Ivanchuk, they tried to break my defense here. Leko as well, Judith Polgar, everybody, yeah. So usually here a3 is the main move, take on c3, knight c6, and that is a kind of tabia of this variation. Well, black is solid, but white has a very typical pawn structure for the knight e5 system. So white has a certain slight dominance in the center. So at some point c and d pawns will be exchanged, usually even immediately here. And then white has this potential of c4 d5, pushing the pawns. But from other point of view, black has no weaknesses, so he just needs to be careful to stop, to be able to find how to counter this c4 d5 idea. Well, I will not tell you the full theory here. It can maybe take another 2-3 hours. But the main position was, if I remember, rook e1, rook e8, bishop f4, rook ac8. Now, for some, it's quite an important move, because if bishop d6, this position was a bit dangerous. I remember c4 and queen e4, and there was some problems here. It was not easy to equalize, I think, simply after bishop e3, if I remember well. So that's why rook c8 was very important. And, well, I think I played many games here. I think almost all possible moves were tried here against me. Bishop d3, h3, c4, and many others. Maybe knight d2 also. So a lot of theory here. Not that simple for black, but in general I was holding well here. I think black is probably equalizing, but again, yeah, it's not so easy. So in general, maybe that is the reason why computers, well, I can say top players, but probably top players' computers draw the attention to this bishop e7, bishop f5 system, which is looking really quite strange to me. I mean, but nowadays it's it's a line which causes white most problems. It's not easy to find an advantage here. So of course the theory is still developing in this variation, and maybe white will be able to pose serious problems. For this moment, in this moment of time, it seems that black holds here, and many strong players are playing, chooses to play Petroff, they are playing this variation. So I would advise you, if you play it with white or with black, to start with this line, because it's very straightforward. And understanding what is the assessment of this variation is very important. Then you will understand, do you need to study this knight c6, huge theory on knight c6 at all, or maybe, let's say, if you play black, you'll be happy with the bishop f5, you don't need the knight c6, yeah? So what are the options here? There is an interesting move, knight e5. Here, I think, have to be checked. Of course, otherwise c4 is a very, very logical move, and then black just wants to take dc4. That's the reason, I guess, why he's playing bishop f5 immediately early on here, to protect the knight on e4. bishop takes c4, knight castles, knight c3, knight c6. Very direct play. I think in my time, again, I'm using this word, when I played Petroff myself and studied it a lot, this was considered to be dubious because of rook e1. But nowadays machines are happy with knight d6. Very strange looking move. I mean, usually the knight doesn't belong to d6 in this variation, but somehow they all in all lines, it seems that black manages just by tempi to equalize or to create some play. For instance, from the bishop f1, there is knight b4. If bishop d3, bishop f6, you need to study it. Of course, c4 is a very important move. I mean, it's the most critical move in this variation. But I suppose, since most of players are playing rook e1 now, I mean, very top players who have powerful engines, probably it means for the moment, they cannot really find any advantage after c4. And after rook e1, black castles. Here, with the idea, now if knight c3 takes on d3, usually queen takes d3 is played. Okay, cd is also possible. Now black, on top of just transposing to those lines with knight c6, he can even play knight d7, which may be even better. And I think here black is very close to equalize. And in case of c4, I think black is playing knight c6 here. And again, so looks quite dangerous, this position, but first of all, it works tactically. So after cd, queen d5, if bishop takes c4, knight c3 is not winning a piece because there is bishop takes f3, knight takes d5, bishop takes d1, knight e7, and it seems that it ends in a draw finally here. One attempt after c4, knight c6 is just to play knight c3. Now black is probably forced to probably take on c4. And again, this is a typical Petroff position. It's slightly more comfortable for white, but nothing special. I mean, if you are experienced Petroff player with black, I guess you will manage with a few accurate moves, you'll manage to get full equality here. But bishop d6 or queen d7. So probably more dangerous is, more challenging is takes and knight c3. This is more challenging. Takes, and and here I think that was actually the reason I didn't like this position with black. At the time, I thought it was quite uncomfortable. But now again, engines are managing, just move per move to. I think they find a way to equalize, even though it looks very, very dangerous. But it seems there are so many draws already in games of grandmasters here, so that probably means that it's probably enough for black to equalize. The main line, I think, going like this: bishop f4, bishop takes d3, bishop d6, and c4, queen h5. Of course, looks, for instance, takes and queen a3 looks extremely dangerous for black, because his queen side is under serious pressure, but computers are very helpful in such positions, so they found queen a5 idea, queen takes d6, takes on a1, rook d8. Now somehow rook e3, because black was threatening to take on e1 and rook takes d6, so rook e3, queen h6 now. I mean, queen f4, queen takes a2, d5, knight a5. Awfully dangerous, again, without computers, of course, or with weak computers, you just don't go for this line. It looks terribly dangerous, but nowadays the chess world is different, chess preparation, and it seems that here black is just in time to hold. That's why maybe the whole system with bishop f5 became popular. And again, the white's now main line is what white usually do is to trying to play knight d2, forcing black to play knight d6, because of course if you take on d2, then white would just take on f5, having two bishops and a nice plus in this position. So knight d6, again, as I've mentioned already, in Petroff, knight is not great on d6, but here that is actually the only reason why in this symmetrical position, let's say if the knight would have been on f6, probably it would be quite trivial to equalize. Knight on d6 is a bit strange, I would say, but still, the recent games show that even if it looks very comfortable for white, I mean, easy play in a symmetrical position, better development, E-line, but computers do not care about all those considerations, and I think at this moment of time, black is usually equalizing here. For instance, one of the ways is to put knight on d7, let's say bishop f4, rook e8, but most common is to play c6, bishop f4 is logical, and then put knight on a6, followed by knight c7. Again, it looks passive for black, and not complete. Doesn't look like it's an equal position. Seems like white has at least some better development, some initiative, but nobody yet could really prove it. With white. So, for instance, if white is playing some normal chess, then slowly rook e2, doubling rook, then slowly black manages to something like that, to get out and to equalize fully. The latest attempt is h4. White is trying to play Nxe5. That was a game Nepomniachtchi Van Hau from candidates in Ekaterinburg. Nepomniachtchi managed to win it, but also, I mean, he had nothing out of the opening. At some point, the position was totally equal. So, that is a very serious variation. Bishop f5, a new trend, because, I mean, in all those lines with knight c6, it's not so easy for black, and white definitely, has many options. So bishop f5 is more, is more straightforward, and as dubious as it looks, but for the moment there is no refutation of this line. So that is all this summary of Petroff defense. Sorry for feeding you with all those lines, much more than some general considerations, because this is, as I've mentioned already, this is this opening where the correct, precise move order is much more important, or knowing some concrete force lines, much more important than understanding some general things, because again, in general, the opening is rather strategically simple. So again, so at the end of studying Petroff, what can I say? With black, if you're a top player or a strong grandmaster, professional player, I think it's not a bad opening, because anyway, it means if you're a 2700 player that you work on chess a lot, you have powerful engines, you have good memory probably, and with this package, the Petroff defense is a very serious opening, very, very good opening, which, where you have a solid position and have good chances to equalize. Without this package, things are getting a bit more complicated. So I believe that this is not really the opening for a non-professional chess player. Because most of the time, if you're not professional, you just enjoy chess, you like to play something a little bit more interesting, or, less maybe equalizing, less drawish, I would say. But anyway, maybe somebody finds there are some lines, especially in bishop d6, which are tricky and also can get complicated. With white, what is good about this opening, that again you have a big choice. So d4, there are lots of even if there is no advantage in any single line, but there are so many lines where you can try to check your opponent, maybe find a small idea, some small move order to pose problems. In d4, third d4, also in third knight e5. I cannot say that black is equalizing so easily, without any problems. No, white in general can find some positions when he is maybe very little, but still slightly better, and trying to press home this slight advantage. And there is another system, which is fifth knight c3, which is a totally different type of game. It's sharper, maybe more double H sometimes, but it's sharper and I would say more aggressive. Maybe the only really aggressive system against such a solid opening like Petroff defense.